Thanks, Ken. Hi, everyone. So today I'm talking about how you can improve software quality with effective feedback. So let me give you a quick overview of my talk. So first, I'm going to cover what kind of challenges you're going to face when you're collecting feedback, what some of the problems are. Next, we're going to have a look at why you need feedback and how feedback can help you ship higher quality software products. And then I'm going to look at 3 different solutions that help you collect feedback effectively from your users. So first, we're going to have a look at a solution to collect feedback from the majority of your users. Next, we're going to have a look at a solution that helps you collect feedback from more advanced users, like your QA testers and other internal users in your company. And then lastly, we're going to have a look at another solution that works in a different problem space. We're going to look at how you can collect feedback effectively from mobile applications, iPhone applications. And finally, I'm going to show you how changing the way we collect feedback on the JIRA team has really helped us come up with better features and a better roadmap for JIRA. So before I begin, I want to run a quick informal survey. How many of you here currently use JIRA? Just put up your hand. So pretty much most of you. Now, how many of you reckon that it's pretty easy to create issues in JIRA? Once again, just put up your hand. So still most of you. So in my talk today, I'm going to show you that you're actually quite wrong when it comes to your end users creating issues in JIRA. So here's a practical example of why. So this is Milton. He's your average kind of user on the web. He's not a software developer, and he doesn't understand issue trackers or any of those software terms. And in his spare time, Milton likes to play Angry Nerds. Now, one day while he's playing, he notices a little problem. There's a little spelling mistake that's snuck in on this site. And he wants to give you some feedback about that. He wants to tell you to fix this problem. So the first thing he has to do is he has to figure out how he can give you feedback. And so he looks around the entire Angry Nerds website for some way to give you this feedback. So this takes him quite a bit of time. But eventually, he finds this tiny little link at the bottom of the site to raise a bug that the developer smartly left there. So when he clicks that link, he's taken straight to the issue tracker for Angry Nerds, which is JIRA. Now, you've got to remember that Milton's not a software developer, and this is the first time he's seen JIRA. And JIRA really doesn't help him here to give his feedback. So there's a random introduction gadget, there's a login screen, but there's no indication of how he can give feedback for Angry Nerds. There's not even a create issue link. And this is, in fact, the spot where you will lose the majority of your users. They'll simply give up. It's too hard. They don't know how to give you feedback. But Milton's a pretty determined kind of guy, so he keeps going. So he figures he probably has to create an account. So he fills in his details, logs in, gets another dashboard, finds the create issue link, and then he finds the create issue dialog. And now he hits the next problem. Your average issue tracker these days will have hundreds of projects, and it's not obvious where he needs to create feedback. And so it takes him, once again, quite a long time to find the right place. And a lot of users will, in fact, create feedback in the wrong place, which then makes it harder for your developers to action that feedback. But eventually he finds the Angry Nerds project, and he hits another problem. Your average create issue form in an issue tracker is really complex, and it has a lot of fields that make sense to software developers, but terms like components, effects versions, environment, they don't really make sense to your end users. And so it takes him a really long time to fill in this form, and he fills in a lot of the information incorrectly. But eventually he gets an issue created, all about a simple little spelling mistake. Now that was 7 screens that he had to jump through to give you a little bit of feedback. He's obviously not too happy about that, and you can imagine that he's probably never ever going to come back and give you feedback again. The problem gets a lot worse though than that. Because it's so hard for your average kind of users to give you feedback, you're only going to get feedback from 2 distinct edge groups. You're going to get feedback from fanboys, so that's users that really love your product or your company, so they don't mind jumping through a few hoops to tell you about the weird kind of feature requests that they often dream up. And you're going to get feedback from haters. So that's a group of users that have run into a problem so severe with your product, they can't continue to work, and they have no choice but raise issues for you. And soon enough, your roadmap for your product is going to be shaped purely by weird feature requests that your fanboys come up with and bug reports that your haters are screaming at you about. Who you really want to shape your roadmap, though, is the crowd. you want the majority of your users to give you feedback and shape your roadmap. If you have a choice between implementing a feature that one of your fanboys has asked for and implementing another feature that 100 of your users are asking for, it's pretty clear which one I'd implement first. So in my talk today, I'm going to show you how you can get feedback effectively from the majority of your users. And I'm going to show you how you can then action that feedback in JIRA so that you can ship better products and better features to your customers. Before we look at some of these solutions, though, I want to talk quickly about why we need feedback. And for that, I'm going to talk about automated cat feeders for a little while. So you may be wondering at this stage why you paid a lot of money to come to a development conference to listen to some guy talk about cat feeders, but there is a point here about software quality, so bear with me for a moment. And this is actually Jeff Atwood's point, who you may have seen speak yesterday. So Jeff bought these automated cat feeders 5 years ago, and they worked. They fed his cats, and he was pretty happy. He didn't have to get up at 5 a.m. anymore to feed his cats, but they also had a lot of what most people would consider minor problems. So they were hard to clean, the cats could knock them over and steal food and things like that. So when this company, 5 years later, came up with an improved model, Jeff upgraded straight away. And what he found was that this company had really listened to the feedback from its users and made 10 what most people would consider really small, detailed improvements that overall enhanced the product a lot. So they were now easier to clean, you could remove the food bowls, the cats couldn't steal food anymore, and it was just a much better experience using this product. And so how this relates to software is that really getting all these small details right is really the difference between a product that customers simply tolerate and a product that customers really enjoy using. And so it's okay to ship a product that doesn't have all these details right to start with, but you need to establish an effective feedback cycle with your customers where they can give you feedback easily every day, and you need to spend time every day implementing those little details. Because I can guarantee you that if you're not doing it, someone else on the internet out there is doing it right now and creating a competing product to you. The other reason why we need to establish an effective feedback cycle is that with agile development, which I imagine most of you are practicing these days, the idea is that you build something within an iteration, so every week or every 2 weeks, you work on a feature, and then you ship that feature to your customers. And you're meant to then get feedback from your customers about how they like using this feature so that you can feed that feedback straight into your next iteration for your developers. Now, this is something that was a really big problem for us, particularly with JIRA, because most of our users are still installing JIRA behind the firewall. And so when we would build a JIRA release and release JIRA 5.0, for example, there would often be a 5 to 6 months delay until users would upgrade and would actually start using the product and then give us feedback in the form of bug reports and support requests. And that's incredibly expensive for you because your development team by that stage has moved on and is already working on other features. And so it's really expensive for you to then bring your development back and improve those features that they worked on ages ago. So how do we solve this problem? So we want your users and your customers to give you feedback fast and effectively, and preferably give it directly to your developers. But as we saw at the start, it's difficult for customers and users to use an issue tracker directly. And so one solution would be to hire someone like Tom, whose job it is to talk to the goddamn customers because he's got people skills. Now, the problem with that solution is that it doesn't scale very well. So if you're like Atlassian and you have 20,000 customers and each one of those customers has thousands of users, you simply can't hire enough people to go and talk to the majority of those users and get feedback. There's really a far better use of your resources than hiring someone like Tom. And so in my 20% time, I set out to solve this problem. I wanted to get a more effective way for customers to provide feedback for any sort of software product. And that's really how I came up with the JIRA Issue Collector plugin. So the JIRA Issue Collector plugin is a plugin for JIRA that lets you configure a collector for a particular project and issue type. And once you've configured a collector, you then get a little bit of JavaScript or HTML that you can embed in any website. And once it's embedded there, when users visit that website, they will get a very visible trigger that they can click, And once they click that trigger, they get a nice, simple form where they can submit feedback. And they can do so anonymously, so they no longer have to create an account and they don't have to log into a JIRA instance. So let's have a look at how that works in a bit more detail. So here we've got a typical kind of company website. It's got a lot of issues. There's missing images. Images are scaled badly. So it's the perfect kind of website to get feedback for. So let's jump into JIRA and create an issue collector for this website. So first of all, we need to go to the right project in JIRA where we're tracking tasks and bugs for this website. So we're going to the Initech website task force project. And in that, we're going to create a new issue collector. This is something that any project administrator can do, by the way. And so when we're creating an issue collector, the first thing you have to do is you have to give it a bit of metadata. So you can give it a name and a description so that we know where this issue collector is going to be used. And then the next thing that you're going to configure is an issue type. So all the issues and all the feedback that you're going to receive is going to be raised as that issue type. And then we get a few options here around remote user and fallback reporter that's really used that the issue collector uses to match to users. So with the issue collector, users can raise feedback anonymously. So if they don't have an account, the issue collector will give them a form where they can fill a name they can fill in a name and an email address, and the issue collector will try to match that against the user in JIRA and then raise the issue as that user. But if no match can be found, if they don't have an account yet in JIRA, then it will simply use the fallback reporter as the reporter for the issue. So let's fill in all that information. So once we've filled in this part of the form, we get to the next important bit, which is the trigger. The trigger, which we'll have a look at in a second, is really what users get to click on to leave feedback. And so there's a few styles built in, and you can customize the text that will be shown. And you can also use completely custom triggers. So if you don't like these styles, you can just create your own elements in your website. And then we get to the next important part, which is the form that your users will see to give feedback once they click the trigger. And so there's a few stock ones built in, or you can choose a completely custom one and configure it with a number of JIRA's fields, and you can rename the labels for these fields so that they make more sense to your users. And you can also reorder these fields. And once you've added this issue collector, you then get a snippet of JavaScript or HTML that you can embed in any HTML website. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to copy this little bit of this little bit of HTML here, and I'm going to jump straight into the Initech website and just paste that script in. And then when we jump back to the website and reload, you now get this very visible feedback trigger on the right-hand side that users can click to give you feedback. And that's it. Users can just go and fill in what they want to tell you. They no longer have to look up the right project. They don't have to worry about logging in. In this example, actually, the issue collectors figured out that this user has an account in JIRA and they're currently logged in there. And so it's all handled automatically for that user. And when we look at the issue that got created, you get all the information that the users entered, plus more. There's the URL, the browser, and screen resolution. And you can actually configure this to scrape any other information from the remote website. So if you, for example, are interested in what version of your product users are giving feedback for, you could scrape the version out of the footer on the page, for example. So why is the issue collector better, really, than sending users directly to your issue tracker with a link? Well, for starters, it's got a visible trigger. So remember, Milton had to spend a lot of time looking for that tiny link in the footer. It's actually a lot better if you have a very visible trigger, like one of the inbuilt styles that I just showed you. Or you can configure a custom one, like this one that we have in JIRA. So in JIRA, we have a custom trigger that's a nice little speech bubble in the header, so very easy to find. The second thing is it has a very simple form. So you no longer have to look through hundreds of projects, and you don't have 30 fields that you have to fill in. You can simply type what you're thinking straight away. And really the most important thing is that you no longer have to context switch. So you no longer have to leave the application that you want to give feedback for and jump to an issue tracker and then come back. Instead, you can just stay within the app, leave feedback in a couple of seconds, and then go back to working, go back to what you were doing. And the best thing about this really is that all this feedback goes directly into the tool that your developers are using. Plus, they get additional information. So in this case, I was scraping the JIRA version, for example, from the page. So this information is really useful for your developers when they have to fix these bugs or try to reproduce them. And the most important thing is really that Milton's now pretty happy because he can give you that little bit of feedback very quickly about that problem on the Angry Nerds website. So we've had a look at a solution that works for the majority of your users. Let's take a look at a solution that works for a different group of users. What about people in your company, your QA testers, and other developers and marketing? How can they give feedback effectively? You might argue that you could just send them to a create issue link in JIRA as well, but there's in fact a better way. So at Atlassian, our mechanism for getting internal feedback is Blitz Tests. So every week or every 2 weeks, we'll get a random group of people from the company, and we'll tell them to stop doing what they normally do for an hour. And in that hour, their job is to take a feature that we're currently developing and test it. So their job is to find bugs, their job is to find usability problems, and just give you general suggestions about how you can improve this feature. Now, when we first started doing Blitz tests, they were a horrible task to manage for the poor QA person who had to sort of accumulate all the feedback from this. Because some users would just scribble notes on pieces of paper, other users would create issues in JIRA, but they'd fill them in with all sorts of different details. And other users, again, would leave comments on a Confluence page. And so one person, usually a QA engineer, would have to spend hours trying to accumulate all this into a backlog that your developers could actually work with. And so one QA engineer got so fed up with this that he worked on a browser extension to make it easier for users to create issues. And this was so successful that we, in fact, launched it as one of our newest products, Bonfire. So here's a quick demo of how Bonfire works. So Bonfire is a browser extension. So once you enable it, you get this nice little tab on the left where you can have 3 columns, issues, sessions, and templates. So we'll talk about issues in a second. That's where you obviously create issues. Sessions corresponds to your test sessions. So each Blitz test will be one test session. And that allows you to group and collect all the feedback in one spot. And we'll have a look at what that looks like in JIRA in a second. And the column that I'm on right now, templates, is really a powerful way to make it easier to create issues. So I can configure a template for a Blitz test that already has a lot of metadata filled in. So things like you may want to set an effects or a fix version or a component for the feature that you're testing. And then you can share that template with all the other participants in this Blitz test. And that really allows them to focus a lot more on just typing the feedback, and they don't have to worry about filling in all this other metadata. So let's have a look at how that works. So I'm just going to edit an existing template here. And just like with the issue collector, you can get additional information from the page as well. So here I'm collecting the URL that we're on. And now if I go to my Issues tab and I select that template, you'll notice that a lot of the information got pre-filled in those fields. And so the user now can just focus on typing his feedback. And Bonfire also includes a really powerful screenshot annotation tool. So you don't have to leave the browser or use another tool and upload a screenshot. You can just do it all right there in the browser on top of the product that you're testing. And then you simply click Create Issue, and that goes off and creates an issue in JIRA. So let's take a look at that. So that issue includes, once again, all the information users entered, plus things like the URL that are configured in the template, which, once again, helps your developers to fix these problems. And you'll notice at the top here that because we're currently having a Blitz test going, there's a banner that tells you that we have a current test session in progress. And so we can just jump to that by clicking on this banner. And on this summary page, you can see all the people that are participating in Blitz test. You can see all the issues that are being raised in the activity stream, and users can even leave general notes about what they're testing, like I've done here. And finally, once the Blitz test is over, you can complete that session. And that then stays around as a permanent record of all the issues that were raised during this Blitz test in JIRA. And so you can always see all the people that were part of this Blitz test. And we actually found that while people are Blitz testing, a lot of users will have this dashboard open so that it can see all the issues that other people are raising. And that's allowed us to test a lot faster because you've already seen that somebody else has found a bug in this area, so you don't need to test that as well. So you can focus on another area and try to test something else. So you're automatically already avoiding raising duplicate issues. So that even speeds up the process even more. So the reason why Bonfire works so well is because it really follows the same principles as the issue collector. So once again, it's really easy to create issues. There's a simple form, and all the metadata is already pre-filled. So you just focus on the stuff that's important. And once again, you don't need to context switch and leave the application that you're testing. You can just stay there. And it's also great for your developers because, once again, they get additional information which helps them reproduce bugs and helps them to fix the problems that were raised. What about a different space though? So we looked at two solutions now that work for websites or HTML apps. What about if you're doing iPhone app development? Can we apply the same principles that we have in the issue collector and Bonfire to an iPhone application? And so I'm going to show you a demo here of JIRA Mobile Connect. So JIRA Mobile Connect is a development library that's available for any iPhone application. And so you can depend on this library when you build your iPhone application, and that allows you to wire it up to a feedback button that you have in your app. And so when users click on this feedback button in your application, they get a simple form to give feedback. So they can just type some text about a problem they found, or they can even leave a voice recording about the problem. And then they simply have to click send, and that's now gone off and created an issue in JIRA behind the scenes. But the user never had to leave the iPhone application. They never had to even go to the web browser to leave feedback. And if you look at the issue, just like with the issue collector and Bonfire, we have additional information such as which version of iOS and which iPhone, and you can even include the location where the feedback was raised. But JIRA Mobile Connect goes one step further. So developers can actually leave a comment on that issue. And once they leave a comment, the user gets a notification in the application, and they can actually reply to that comment within the app, and that goes straight back to the JIRA issue. So it's a really powerful way for your developers to actually have an active conversation with your users, and it really empowers them to fix issues much more quickly. Here's a few other ways that Bonfire helps you raise issues. So you can also take screenshots and annotate them directly on the iPhone, just by drawing on the screen with your finger. And JIRA Mobile Connect also includes a crash reporter. So if your application crashes, like in this case, the next time you open it up, you'll get asked if you want to submit this crash report. And that will include all the stack traces and logs your developers need to fix this problem. So now we've looked at a number of ways that you can collect feedback. And you're getting a lot of these feedback issues into JIRA. So what do you do with this feedback once it's JIRA? How can you work with this the best way? So the first lesson that we learned at Atlassian about dealing with this feedback is that you shouldn't hide it from your developers. It may seem very tempting at the start to have a product manager or a team lead to triage these feedback issues and only really show the ones that are important to your developers and get them to work on those. But we found that that didn't help us get our developers more engaged with the customers and more interested in the customers' problems. And so the way we fixed this problem is we came up with this filter. So this filter looks up all the feedback issues that were created in the last 24 hours. And then we created a filter subscription, which emails the filter results from this search to all JIRA developers. So this is, you probably can't see this on the slides very well, but this is a screenshot of my email inbox. And you can see every day I'm getting an email with all the customer feedback issues that our customers have raised for JIRA. And so if you open up one of these emails, you actually see all the individual feedback issues that customers raised. And you can just jump straight to these and see all the stuff that they typed and told us. And we found after a while of doing this, this was great at getting our developers more involved again. And there's a lot of chat messages going through our internal HipChat room where if we get positive feedback, some developers get really excited about that. But also they started discussing a lot of the negative feedback and solutions that we could come up with to fix these problems. And of course, the other good thing is that once you have this feedback in JIRA, JIRA is really a great tool designed to work with this kind of information. If you think about feedback, it's really just a long list of tasks or a long list of bugs that you need to action. And that's really what JIRA is designed for. So you can plan it really easily. So for example, you can create a Greenhopper rapid board that shows you all the feedback issues that come in, and you can get your developers to actively estimate these stories and give them story points, so a measure of complexity. And your product managers can then drag these issues into the right order and prioritize which ones you want to work on first. And you can build them. You can take them through the workflow and make it really easy for your developers to really action all this feedback that you're getting. And finally, you can also track your progress. You can get all the charts and all the filters and statistics that JIRA already offers to really monitor how well you're doing at answering feedback from your customers. So now let's have a look at how changing the way we collect feedback has really worked for JIRA. So we started including an issue collector April last year. And since then, we had over 1,300 feedback issues raised by our customers. And you can see from that graph there, as users are upgrading to later versions of JIRA that include this issue collector, we're getting more and more feedback from our customers every day. And so here's an example of one of these bits of feedback that we get. So here's a very positive review of some features that we implemented in Greenhopper. Here's a customer who really likes the new swim lanes view where you can view issues directly in Greenhopper. And I can tell you from my personal experience of developing JIRA for 5.5 years, in the previous 5 years or so, I've never seen a single bit of positive feedback that came in through JIRA.Atlassian.com. Because of the way it's set up, people only go to JIRA.Atlassian.com to raise problems, to raise bugs, and maybe feature requests, but they never tell you the fact that they like something. So because we've now made it easier for people to give us feedback through the issue collector, it's actually great to see that sometimes we get positive feedback like this, and it's incredibly motivating for developers who've only seen bug reports and bad reports of your software to actually get positive reviews like this directly from customers. And so here's another positive review where someone actually likes JIRA for project management and thinks that it's very simple to use. But I won't lie to you, most of the feedback that you're going to get is still going to be negative. So here's one of these bits of negative feedback. So here's a user that used to use Rally, and he's telling us that he really finds JIRA quite difficult to use, and he's not really understanding or agreeing with our concept of representing a bug or a user story as an issue. Now, what's interesting about this particular bit of feedback is that this customer went on for another 2 or 3 paragraphs in a lot of great detail, telling us exactly what the problem was and how he thinks we should fix it. And so it's an interesting fact that users are not willing to spend 5 minutes jumping through a login screen or creating an account somewhere and looking up the right project to give you feedback, but they're very happy to spend 20 or 30 minutes to give you feedback once you make it really easy for them to type that feedback. The other thing I find interesting about the feedback that we're getting is that even though it's possible to provide anonymous feedback, over 90% of the issues that we receive actually have a name and an email address that the users filled in. And so this is really becoming a very powerful tool for our product managers, because they can actually go back to certain customers when we're working on features that address the feedback they've given us, and we know that they're interested in these features, and we can get them to help us really make these features better. So it's a lot better than just picking a random sample of your user base that you have no idea if you're really just annoying them with these questions about these new features that you're developing. You can really target users that are interested in helping you. And so really, changing the way we collect feedback on the JIRA team through the use of an issue collector and getting feedback from the majority of our users now has really allowed us to come up with a far better roadmap for JIRA. So one of the main problems that keeps coming up in feedback is that JIRA is too complex to use, and the core experience of editing issues, finding issues, creating issues is not intuitive for new users. And so we were able to change our roadmap and bring in features like inline edit, like you saw in the keynote today from Scott, that really address these issues around making the core experience in JIRA easy again. And there's a whole number of other features coming soon that look at making searching for issues simpler again as well. And so really, to recap what you need to establish an effective feedback loop, the first thing is you need to remove barriers. So your users shouldn't have to sign up for an account. They shouldn't have to log in. And also, the form that they use to give you feedback needs to be as simple as possible. The best thing you can give them is just a simple text area. The second thing is you need to remove the middleman. So you shouldn't have someone like Tom whose job it is to talk to customers and then raise feedback for your developers. The feedback that you're getting should go straight into the tool that your developers are using to develop the software. And you should share all that raw feedback directly with all your developers. And lastly, the feedback that you're collecting needs to be contextual. So it needs to contain information about the environment where it came from, so that your developers can action feedback a lot faster and they can fix bugs and problems a lot quicker. And so I hope in this talk today, I showed you a number of ways that you can collect feedback more efficiently through tools like the Issue Collector, Bonfire, or JIRA Mobile Connect. You don't have to really use these tools. There's other tools out there. But really, it's important that the feedback from these tools flows straight into JIRA or whatever issue tracking tool you're using, so that you can share this feedback directly with your developers. And if you're doing that, then your developers are going to become a lot more passionate about your customers' problems, and they're going to be able to really fix all those little details. So think back to the cat feeders. They can fix all those little details that are annoying your customers, and you're going to empower them to ship features and products that really delight your customers. Thanks very much.